Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about the power and magic of emotion, explored through the lens of astrology, divination, and art. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, Akashic Records reader, poet, and witch, and I'm here to help you feel your feels. Hi all, happy new moon in Aries and happy solar eclipse. The eclipse was exact today at 12:20 p.m. Mountain Time. So that's 11:20 a.m. Pacific and 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is a hugely Aries fiery new moon. We have so much shit going on in Aries. It's kind of wild and people have been feeling it. A lot of people have been getting headaches this week, migraines, feeling dizzy. Aries rules the head. And so a lot of people are feeling that sort of like mental pressure and face and head pressure and all of that stuff. And it's super common when we have this many planets in Aries. And as a reminder, when we have a new moon, it means that the sun and the moon are at the exact same position in the sky. And so at 12:20 Mountain time today, the sun and the moon met at 19 degrees of Aries. And because this is an eclipse, that means that the lunar nodes are close by. And so in this case, the north node at 15 degrees of Aries is just about 4 degrees away from our sun and moon. And also notably, Chiron is almost precisely also at 1924, whereas the sun and moon are at 1923 of Aries. So like literally right on top of them, like a tiny little piece of dust width away from them. And Chiron brings us into wounding and pain and aches and stuff that can feel really tender. And so on this new moon, where there's so much Aries energy happening, because in addition, we also have Venus in Aries, we also have Mercury retrograde at 24 Aries and Venus at 4. And so this conjunction between the sun, the moon, Chiron, and the north node is really the gasper of this chart. Like if you look at it, you can see that there's this huge congregation of planets and bodies that are up at the top of the chart in Aries, and it's like there's not a whole lot going on in the rest of the chart. It's all focused there. And so I think when we have so much Aries energy happening, there's obviously a huge, maybe not obviously, but there is a huge amount of attention that's going toward the self and toward the way that we self-express, toward the way that we identify. Our sense of identity, our sense of self is really in focus. And because of Chiron's involvement, that can feel a little bit painful today. So that might be feeling extra critical of yourself. That might mean that you are just feeling a little bit more self-conscious. And that could be something that you identify and then move through quite quickly, because Aries can be quite quick. Cardinal fire, it's the first sign of the zodiac that kind of comes out hot. And so if you're noticing insecurities come up, if you're noticing fears or a sense of ambivalence and just kind of self-doubt that might be plaguing your thoughts at times, there's also this incredible capacity that you have to move through that. And so material that's been kind of sitting in the back of your psyche for maybe years could potentially come into the spotlight today and be like, hey, I'm here. It's time to shake this shit up and burn this away and choose something new. And the element of choice feels really important here. Choosing something new, choosing to confront your fears or face your fears or be with your fears in a new way. Maybe choosing to take a bold action that feels a little bit scary, but is inevitably or ultimately self-honoring, something that really honors yourself and your identity and the new way that you would like to do things. And that sort of like innovative new way, put a fresh foot forward, like step forward in a new vibe, all of that is very emphasized under this transit, especially since the North Node is involved and it's pointing us toward an area of life that we're growing and evolving in. So I would look to where the degrees like 15 to 19 degrees of Aries fall in your natal chart, or let's say like 15 to 20, because that area of your life is getting this supercharge of energy and inviting you into exploration, inviting you to spark a new fire, to set a match, to say something new about yourself, and to really kind of declare yourself, whether it's just to you or whether it's to the world or other people in your life, or your plants or your pets or whoever. And that sort of declaration is important because Aries is a sign that declares itself. It's a sign that is learning about how to take up space, is learning about how to tune into its instincts and to honor its instincts, and to kind of like wield the energy of fire in a way that is inspired. And so this can be a very creative transit. It's a beautiful time to move your body and to get movement and energy and vitality in. It's a great time to make stuff, to move stuff. I did a big cleaning in the lead up to this eclipse and just kind of had this surge of energy that felt like it was powering me. And it can feel very vital and like embodied and physical and visceral. This is also a great time to get off. So if you need to go tend to yourself, that is recommended. That can be a good way to kind of like channel the fire energy, and your body might be craving touch and craving stimulation, whether that's sexual stimulation or like play and fun, movement, dance, creativity. There are all sorts of ways to kind of tune into that sacral energy and express yourself. And you might notice yourself doing things differently, moving differently. And that could be first, again, preceded by some degree of insecurity. It could be that you face a moment today where you get a little bit shy, or where you feel self-critical, where you feel a little bit timid. And then you're given this opportunity to make a different choice and to say like, actually, fuck that. Like, I choose to be more confident. I choose to express myself. I choose to be weird. I choose to own this part of me that maybe someone along the way told me was not okay. But in doing so, in expressing this part of me and choosing me, I'm healing this ache within me that says that it's not okay to be true to me. So notice what's coming up. And again, it could be in whatever part of your chart contains the degrees between like 15, 20 degrees of Aries. Or it could be activating different parts of your chart. We're looking at the cardinal signs here. So we have Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn all in focus. And if you have any planets or points, angles that fall between those degrees roughly, then this eclipse is really hitting your chart in a big way and causing a bit of a stir up in those parts of your chart that contain those cardinal signs. But what we also have going on is, because we have so many bodies in Aries at this moment, they're all being ruled by Mars, which is currently in Pisces. And Mars is at 13 Pisces, forming a conjunction to Saturn at 14 degrees of Pisces. So they're pretty tight together. And Saturn and Mars can be kind of an interesting duo at times. It can be like a push and pull. Mars is wanting to act, where Saturn is wanting to plan and kind of like look ahead and make smart and deliberate choices, whereas Mars can be a little bit more impulsive. And so you might be feeling this tug of war between like surging forward and taking action, and waiting and practicing patience. And patience is not exactly a keyword that we find when we have so many planets in Aries. Aries wants to surge forward. Aries wants to like follow the instinct, make the choice, do the thing, light the fire. Whereas Mars in Pisces conjunct Saturn is sort of like, that's all well and good, but how are we honoring our soul? Is this a soul-driven choice? Is this authentic? Is this honoring the whole? And so it's sort of pulling us away from this self-focus that Aries can have and bringing us into this collective focus that might center more on compassion. And so you might kind of feel this tug between like doing the self-honoring thing that feels courageous and desirable and kind of maybe feeds your ego at times, versus doing the more compassionate thing that Mars and Saturn and Pisces might ask of us. Mars and Pisces can be a very compassionate placement that wants to serve and that wants to make choices and move in a way that is intuitive and dreamy and conscious and spiritual. And so I think it's actually a really beautiful balance that we see here between the ruler Mars and Pisces and all of these all of these Aries placements that can be a bit more demanding and a bit more self-focused. So if you feel that tug of war, just try to make space for it and honor it and allow it to be, because it's probably guiding you toward a more healthy and cooperative way of expressing yourself amongst the whole and making choices that are a little bit less selfish and a little bit more conscious, a little bit more self-aware. So I say all that in part because I think that's a good tee up to the tarot reading that I'm going to share with you today. But also, I want to back up for a second and show you kind of the way that the rulership today is circling around itself, because we can go a step farther and look at the ruler of our ruler. So the ruler of Mars in Pisces is Jupiter in Taurus. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of the sign of Pisces. And so we look up to Jupiter in Taurus to understand a bit more of the story here, and it brings us into the outer planets. And so Jupiter in Taurus is currently conjunct Uranus, or approaching a conjunction with Uranus, which will perfect later this month. And Jupiter in Taurus is very much about our resources and the way that we relate to the earth and the way that we relate to our bodies and what we possess and what we find beautiful and all of these Venusian, Taurian things. And so I'm getting this like really loud call to, express gratitude and to focus specifically gratitude around what you eat. I sort of intuitively adopted more of a gratitude practice over the past couple of weeks, building up to this transit, more consistent gratitude practice, I should say. And before every meal, I've been sitting down and expressing gratitude to the natural elements that helped form the food, to the creatures and critters, to the hands that worked the land, to the land itself, to the ancestors and the indigenous people who have acted as guardians of the land and have passed down ancestral wisdom, and to my own body, to my guides and my protectors for gifting me with this body that can taste and touch and swallow and eat and all of these magnificent things. And it's really helping me ground back into something I grew up with, which was praying before meals, and something that I've rejected for a long time because of not wanting to be deeply associated with like remnants of organized religion, but something I've come back to because there's a beauty in tradition when it is adapted to meet our current needs and our current world. And so that return to tradition for me, but this adaptation where I'm expressing gratitude to spirit and to the land and to the ancient peoples who have acted as guardians to the land and to the critters and all of this stuff, feels like this more self-honoring version of tradition. And so you might be feeling this call to innovate on tradition and to explore how you can weave gratitude into your day-to-day practices in a way that feels less like maybe structured and confining, like sitting down and saying a prayer to God, which was the way that I grew up, and more so expressing that gratitude in a way that feels intuitive and authentic to you. And authenticity is important under a big Aries transit like this. Aries wants us to come to our sacred fire and to understand the way that our energy works and to honor that. And then again, if you go up the food chain here, we have Mars in Pisces, which is all about that sort of compassionate expression and compassionate drive. And then up to Jupiter in Taurus, gratitude for what we possess and gratitude for the resources that we've been gifted gracefully without doing a whole lot, the way that the earth provides for us and the way that we can recognize that through a consistent gratitude practice. And then looking over to Uranus, how we can innovate that and create something new for ourselves. And so then we get this loop-de-loop effect where when we look at Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus, they're both ruled by Venus, the traditional ruler of Taurus. And that brings us back to Aries, Venus at 4 degrees of Aries. And from there, we just go through this loop because it's back to Mars and back to Jupiter and then back to Venus. And so Venus, Jupiter, and Mars are really important players in this chart. And they're speaking the loudest to me, apart from the obvious like Sun, Moon, and Chiron and North Node. Venus is kind of the like quiet presence in this chart, newly entered Aries at 4 degrees of Aries, the newest player in this Aries mashup. And Venus is coming through to beautify a lot of what's already been done in Aries. So as Venus transits through Aries, there's really this focus on how we can bring beautiful self-expression and how we can add pleasure to all of this terrain that these other planets have been working through. And as Mercury retraces its steps back through Aries, there's also this reflection on what it is that we need to integrate about ourselves. What have we learned about ourselves recently that may have come as a shock, or that may have surprised us, or that may have confused us, or excited us and made us curious and wanting to explore more deeply? Mercury retrograde in Aries is inviting us into that exploration and asking us to ask big but simple questions like, who am I? What is it that I really want? Who am I declaring myself to be through my actions? Kind of like a show me, don't tell me thing. Like, what have my actions recently shown me about myself? And do I like that? Do I like this person that I'm becoming? Do I give them thumbs up? And if I'm not giving them thumbs up, why is that? Is it because I'm behaving out of step with my values? Or is it because there's some ancient belief within me that needs to die that's telling me that I'm not acceptable as I am? And so that kind of exploration is both a Venusian and Mercury retrograde. And it's bringing us into this real energy of like acceptance, but also awareness. Like, how can I be more aware of myself without self-flagellating? Can I practice self-awareness without being punitive? Can I accept myself, flaws and all, and then ask if there are simple ways that I can like be even better in this world, and not in like a self-optimizing way, but like, is there a way I can live in deeper accordance with my values and have that lead the way? And with Venus moving through Aries, there's this sort of pioneering energy when it comes to values being a Venusian topic. And so this might be a time where your values shift, or where you notice that actually this choice that I was judging myself harshly for is just a reflection of a new version of myself that's emerging, that's maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable because it's so new. So that could be a thing too. Like, maybe your values and your outlook on life are actually just changing in really profound ways, and you're seeing the first signs of that change through the new choices that you're making. So leave space for disruption, leave space for paradox, leave space for things to feel a little bit confusing, and know that as Mercury retraces its steps here, there is this sort of rewiring that's happening around your personhood and around your identity. And again, that would be especially true for the houses in your chart that contain the sign of Aries. So that is kind of the gist of it. I could speak more to the outer planets, but it's not feeling super well. Let me speak to one. So more on this topic of the evolution of our values, we do have Pluto in Aquarius that's forming a sweet little sextile to our Venus in Aries. And so this is a really like loving nudge for transformation. Venus has passed over its exact conjunction with Pluto already, so it's separating from a sextile, and in that process, it's offering us some degree of integration, where we, again, have learned something about ourselves recently, the way that we relate to other people. Maybe we've learned something about the way that we love and the way that we receive love and what we find beautiful and pleasant and what we're attracted to. This could be explorations around gender and sexuality. It could be explorations that is more strictly about our personal values, but also our beauty, the way we show up, our style, like all of these delicious Venusian things, including pleasure. And so know that pleasure practices, placing pleasure practices front and center right now is a really great healing balm for any identity stuff that might come up. And it's something that can really help nudge us through this very fiery time, is coming back to the body and coming back to our desires and figuring out if there are like self-loving ways that we can honor our desires and really like removing the shame from our desires and really honoring them as something that's an expression of our identity. So I will leave the astrology there, and I want to move into our little tarot reading for this transit, which is kind of a whopper. We got all major arcana here. So starting off with our overall energy, or our anchor card, we have the Tower reversed. So this is actually a Mars card. Mars is connected to the Tower. And again, it's a very Martian time with all of these Aries planets. The sense I get here, I mean, the Tower reversed is usually that we're avoiding some type of catastrophe or breakdown. So if there is something in your life that is feeling like it's inevitably going to crumble, but you may keep pushing it to the recesses of your brain, or trying to avoid it, or trying to kind of stay in what feels like comfortable denial over something that needs to die, something that needs to end, this would be a time to courageously face that. And Mercury retrograde in Aries is probably the window to do it. Mercury will be retrograde through April 25th. It stationed retrograde on April 1st. And so we're about a week into its retrograde right now, and we have a couple more weeks to go here. And this transit is helping us to face things, helping us to get honest. And so if there's something in your life that's felt foundational to you, but that has begun to show signs of like preemptive wobble and teetering on the edge and feeling uncomfortable to the point of feeling inauthentic, that's something to really explore throughout this Mercury retrograde and throughout this, especially the next 6 months, since eclipses tend to have a 6-month echo to them. And that will bring us into our September eclipse, our September and October eclipses. We have one on September 17th and one on October 2nd. And those eclipses will be the echo of what's going down right now. So the intentions that you've set and the choices that you've made throughout this eclipse window, which began on March 25th, will echo outward into the fall of this year, or that would be the spring in the southern hemisphere. And it could be that there's something here that again needs to crumble, and something that has felt foundational in our lives, whether that's external or internal. Like we're talking a lot about values and beliefs. And so again, consider those things, but also look to the Aries part of your chart to understand what might be crumbling here. But also the Libra part of your chart. And so that's actually more accurate. There's crumbling happening, I think, in both parts, whereas the Aries part of our chart is sort of like the rubble that's clearing the way for all of this new growth. And the Libra part of our chart, where the South Node is transiting, is showing us a point of release and something that really needs to break down so that we can have a breakthrough. And so that would, again, look to your chart, look to where Libra falls in your chart to understand exactly what is facing some type of breakdown and some type of destruction in order to create eventual growth. But for now, it's more of a focus on release. And so this is most likely what's coming up. The Libra part of our chart could have a lot to do with relationships. We've seen a lot of breakups throughout the South Node in Libra. It's very typical since Libra is often connected to our personal relationships and our intimate relationships. And so a lot of breakdowns in foundational relationships in our lives, a lot of people kind of reimagining their relationships and choosing to revise the structure, revise their relational patterns, if not the actual relationships. And so there might be a way of relating that has become outdated for you that really needs to be waved bye-bye. And it's likely you've seen sort of the like appearance of this or the reappearance of this throughout this 2-week eclipse window so far. And you can look back to the spring of last year, 2023, and also to the fall of last year in October of 2023, because those periods would have been the first eclipses on the Aries-Libra axis, giving us hints at what's to come. And again, these occur in 6-month gaps. And so the Aries eclipse that we experienced in April of last year was showing us something about our identity. And then the Libra eclipse that we experienced in October of last year was showing something about our relationships. And throughout this whole period, we're working with this material, but it just becomes sort of exacerbated and heightened under the actual eclipse windows. And so if you want to do that reflective exercise, you can go back to those dates and consider what was actually going on for you. And just for the hell of it, let me just read them aloud for you so you can reference it. So in 2023, our solar eclipse in Aries was on April 19th, and that was at 29:49 Aries. And our first Libra eclipse was on October 14th, and that was at 21 Libra. So it's very likely that those themes have come back around, stuff that was going on during that chapter of our life, and that stuff has probably resurfaced from this March 25th to April 8th window. And then the 2024 dates for later this year will be September 17th when we have our first Pisces eclipse at 25 Pisces, and then October 2nd when we have our last Libra eclipse, which is at 10 degrees of Libra. So consider those dates, mark them down if you want to, do some journaling, look back on your calendar, on your journal entries from the past, or just do a reflective exercise if you feel like getting intellectual about it. Or just notice what's happening for you. Notice what's happening for you emotionally during this time. Notice what's happening in your relationships. Notice what's happening within your psyche and within your self-expression and your identity, because that is the material right there. And often the world will show us synchronicities and symbols and will nudge us to try to wake us up and try to get us to see something. So ultimately being present during eclipse windows is the most self-loving action and the way to stay spiritually connected. So moving on to our challenge, we have the Lovers reversed. So we're talking about relationships and breakdowns, and the Lovers reversed is bringing us into this even more deeply. This is technically a Gemini card. The Lovers can be about choice, and it can also be about our loving relationships and our partnerships. With the Lovers reverse coming up as our challenge, it feels like we're feeling unable to make a choice. Like we feel kind of stalled. We feel maybe that's some of that like Mars Saturn stuff that's coming through. Like I want to take this step forward, but I also don't want to. And I'm fearful about what's going to crumble if I do this or if I do that. And so we could get stuck in analysis paralysis and feel like we're unable to move forward and unable to make a choice because we fear the outcome and we fear the unknown and we fear what we might lose. So this isn't really something that I can answer for you. It's not something that anyone else can answer for you. It's something that you have to go toward your own heart in order to discover. And to be patient with yourself is an act of love right now. So that might mean like, I'm not going to make a choice about anything big in my life until Mercury retrograde is over. Or don't use that to sidestep responsibilities. So maybe it's like just after this eclipse passes. So maybe this week is a time that you get clarity on what it is that you truly want. And maybe this Aries eclipse gives you clues about what it is that you really want moving forward and helps you to really feel into that truth and that authenticity. But for some of us, it is more likely that this is something that won't quite clear up for us for at least a couple more weeks here as we move through the rest of this Mercury retrograde. So if you have big choices that are in front of you and you have the capacity to wait a little bit longer, you might want to wait until April 25th to make any huge choices in your life until Mercury stations direct in Aries. But again, it's very likely that this closing of this eclipse window and this Aries eclipse today has given you some type of self-insight that can help you make that choice and can help you move forward in a way that is authentic to you and potentially to take a risk. This eclipse in a big way is asking us to kind of like do it, like do the thing, like make the choice, look at ourselves honestly and identify like who we want to be moving forward and to kind of come out of hiding and to be clear about ourselves and be clear about our intentions. And Chiron is making that maybe an achy, kind of hurtful process at times. And we might have to hurt other people if we're being dishonest with ourselves or with other people. But ultimately, there is this push toward honesty and this push toward self-honoring. And with Mars in Pisces ruling all of this Aries stuff, there's also the capacity for us to be more compassionate in the way that we approach conflict and in the way that we approach difficult conversations. So use this time wisely and, maybe take a beat if you're contemplating big choices, if you're trying to figure out what your next steps are, take a beat and ask yourself, what is the self-loving choice and how can I communicate that compassionately? How can I communicate that with respect for other people and with respect for the soul and spirit of other people? And finally, our gift this transit is the Hierophant. So this is a Taurus card. So we do have both Mars coming through with the Tower, and then we also have Venus technically by kind of like second relationship here, because the Hierophant, again, is a Taurus card and Venus rules Taurus. So this is putting more focus into the sort of like conventions and traditions that show up in our lives, and they're showing up in a beautiful way. So there might be some conventions that we want to keep. There might be some traditions that we want to continue to uphold. And I mentioned that with Jupiter in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus, sort of like innovating on old traditions, but deciding not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and deciding to keep some pieces of our history and our traditions alive because they do serve us. And so you might not want to throw everything in your life out, even though you might be tempted throughout this period to do that. Because again, Aries can be impulsive. And with all of these planets in Aries, we might be like, it all goes, everything goes all at once, nothing left. Let's burn it all down. Let's do it all over. And maybe that is true. For some of us, that might be true. That might be the way. But also there is this need for us to innovate and respect tradition in the process. So how can we innovate on the traditions that we participate in? How can we innovate on the conventions that we uphold throughout our lives? The Hierophant can be restrictive at times and confining and something that kind of keeps us stuck in like conventional ways of living. But because of Uranus in Taurus at this moment, it feels like there's this adaptation ability. There's this opportunity for us to look at the old and ask ourselves what we want to keep from that and what we want to let go of and what we want to transform. The Hierophant can also be teachers and spiritual wisdom. And so this might be a beautiful time for you to look toward teachers and to look toward bodies of knowledge, and especially spiritual knowledge that have been particularly influential and helped kind of shape your ideologies and your views on the world. This might be a time to pray. This might be a time to come back again to traditional practices that help you ground and root and kind of locate yourself amidst the vastness of the universe. So looking toward teachers, looking toward spiritual guides, looking toward people that you consider wise and authentic leaders in your life, and also looking toward that wise and authentic leader within yourself, like connecting to your higher self or your wiser self or your future self or however you define that, and intentionally switching into that state of mind. Like, how can I embody my wisest self at this moment? Or what would my wisest self have to say about this? And you can fast forward to a future date and be like, 17 years from now, what would that version of myself have to say about what's going on in my life right now? And where would they guide me? What choice would they make? Looking back on me now, what would they advise me? And that might be the best expression of Hierophant energy, as opposed to looking to external teachers, more so like how can my relationship with my future self and with my guides and my spirit team inform my path at this moment? And what choice would honor my future self and my current self? So that's all I got. I hope that's helpful. I was thinking about tossing out these new moon podcast episodes when I was revising the structure for the podcast, but I don't know. I got really excited about doing this today. So we did it. And I think I'm going to keep doing it. And if you didn't catch my season 5 trailer where I explained how I'm going to shift the podcast, you can go back and listen to that for more details. I released my first episode for my new Friday Feels series on Friday, and it was about lust, and it was kind of tasty. So if you want to go back on that, you can listen to that. And I also announced that I'm going to be rolling out a Patreon podcast, and there are already many, many episodes that have been published just from like audio stuff that I've posted on Patreon over the past couple years. So if you would like to unlock that subscribers only podcast, you can become a patron for $6 a month or more. And that gives you access to all of those episodes. The podcast is called 4 of Wands, and you can also go follow it if you'd like, because I will probably release a monthly, like every one episode that's not paywalled. But if you do want to support this podcast and my work, you can become a patron at patreon.com/feelingloudly. And you can also purchase a reading with me. I do recorded readings and live readings, astrology, tarot, and the Akashic Records. Okay, I love you. Happy new moon in Aries. I'm wishing you all the best, and I hope you step forward with courage and really honor yourself in the process. Take care.